up, guys? This is John Nelson, and you're listening to the Starting Block Podcast. This, guys, is a show for complete athletic development. Our mission, our objective, our purpose is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. Now, if you're new to the show, I want to welcome you. Appreciate you joining. Here's how we operate. We have multiple episodes within the show. The first episode you're going to hear is where myself and my co-host, Chris Scarborough. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon.
This is where Chris and I will do a Q&A. That's where you obviously submit your questions to us, and we'll tackle them. Those are going to be anything related to performance, training, the neuro voodoo stuff, nutrition, rehab, anything with, athletic performance, we'll tackle it. That is Q&A. Chris, where can they submit the questions?
Info at startingblockpodcast.com.
All right, cool. Next is a guest interview, and I will bring our guest on in just a second. But the guest interview is just like every other podcast on the planet. It's where we're going to bring in our friends, colleagues from across the globe, and they're going to share their stories of how they win, what they do in their facilities with their patients, their clients. We have a range of doctors, healthcare providers, trainers, coaches, all across the board. That is the guest interview, and the final episode you're going to hear. It's going to be like a quarterly episode, Friday Fire Fact. That's where I'm going to jump on and give you about 15 minutes of just something that I feel that is important to know in our industry going on, something I experienced. It may be a little more motivational, business related, something like that. Excuse me. And that is going to be a quarterly episode. And so I blew through that very quickly because we got a lot of ground to cover today. And we are pleased in this guest interview to welcome back Dr. Matt Boule. What's up, bro? How are you?
I'm so happy to be back with you guys. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, if you were watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, you understand what's getting ready to happen here. But if you're listening on audio, which is where most of our subscribers are, you will not know that Dr. Matt and I have very similar hats we are currently wearing. Matt, what's your hat say?
So mine says "Keep America Great."
Oh, okay. Mine says "Make America Great Again." And we're going to ruffle some feathers with this episode. And quite frankly, if you don't like it, I don't really care. Matt and I got some things that we want to get off our chest and talk about. And you're either on board or you're not.
Well, honestly, John, I think the timing was absolutely perfect. I mean, we scheduled Matt 6 weeks ago for today, and we had no idea, that we were going to be running into a topic that was like perfectly fed for the timing of this episode. It couldn't have happened better.
Yeah,
so,
this might be the last time we talk to Matt.
Could be. Yeah, could be. We'll get into that in a minute.
Well, so, all right, here's the deal, guys. If you don't follow Matt on social, you need to. Obviously his content is great, but he, as well as myself, we're very outspoken about the shit that's going on in the world and the direction that things are headed. And I think to say it right off the front end, I think, Matt, where you and I tend to agree with stuff is like, people would say I'm Republican or conservative because I'm in the South, and I've got the American flag on my arm and behind me, but I'm not right or left. Like, I'm not Republican, Democrat. I am pro-freedom. And there's a big difference there. Not right or left. I'm pro-freedom. And I feel like you see the same thing. I feel like you look at the world from that perspective too.
100%. I think autonomy is what we try to create in the people that we take care of. It's definitely my perspective. When people consult with me, they want to be able to do more for themselves and by themselves. And that really is human dignity, right? It's allowing people to become more for themselves so they can be more for others. And that does translate into some form of freedom. So I take that very, very personally. I take it very much to heart. And I guess on a global scale, it probably is the reason why I've always been so interested in politics. And I also have a really hard time identifying myself with a party. I'm always willing to say that things can change. My views have definitely changed in terms of who I would vote for, whether it's in Canada or the US. I used to really like Justin Trudeau. I mean, just to give, I'm really open to anything, really. So I think at some point you do have to make a choice at a given moment in time and then, move forward. But I'm always open to say, you know what, just tell me what you've got. Show me your point of view. And I'm not fixed into anything, although I'm wearing a MAGA hat right now.
Go ahead, Chris. What were you gonna say?
No, I was going to say let's get into that and just for a bit, because there's a reason why, you take somebody like John or me, and I was traditionally trained in a medical field, and there's a reason why I got out of it, because I actually witnessed firsthand, not only with myself, but I witnessed other patients receiving treatment by John's mentor, by the way, who got a tremendous result that I could have never gotten with that same person in a more traditional type practice. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this question. I mean, but why is it so important, I guess, why is it so important that we retain this freedom from a medical practice perspective? I mean, isn't it the whole point behind, like, hey, let's manage everything down to the dime, so that, hey, we know everybody's getting the exact same treatment for the exact same thing, and blah 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 blah. Well, it's always been my experience that if I can get somebody better in 15 minutes for $50 than someone else who gets them better in 12 weeks for about $5,000, what harm was done, right? Well, anyway, give us your perspective on that, Matt. I mean, I don't. I'm like I said, I'm having a hard time even coming up with the right way to even ask that
Yeah.
question. But what is it? Why it is so important about, like, health freedom and our ability to choose in this type thing?
Um, so, I, so yeah, it's a hard question to ask and it's a hard question to answer, but I see where you're going, and I'm just
Yeah,
trying to respect where you were heading there.
yeah.
Um, so freedom to choose obviously does involve to some extent freedom to choose, what happens with our bodies and, medically speaking. So if we jump right into it, you think of vaccine mandates, and so. And then, if you look at any society, at some point, some rules are put in place so that the greater good, so that people benefit from other people's actions, and sometimes in any context that could mean that you won't be able to do exactly what you want to do, but it's going to benefit others. And I guess that was the approach of the governments, really, in many cases, to say, well, we're going to make it really tough for you to have a life if you don't get vaccinated because we need to protect other people. It's just so obviously let's say that this had been the case where if we hadn't all been vaccinated, something terribly wrong would have happened. I mean, much worse than what actually did. Average age of people passing away from COVID in where I live was 83 years old. That happens to be the age at which you're supposed to die. So
Hmm.
obviously, and far from me the idea of wanting to say that there was no case in point where this vaccine could have been useful. I think if something exists, I'm like that with training. I'm like that with therapy. I do believe that if something out there exists, there has to be a purpose for it. Now, some training techniques might not be the greatest, but they have been really mediatized, so everyone's doing them. Could that be the case with the COVID vaccines? Possibly. It's the insistence with which this was presented that felt off versus the actual product, maybe even when it's promoted both in New York and Montreal that if you go and get vaccinated, we're going to give you either, donuts or hot dogs or French fries. The mayor of New York with the French
The
fries.
governor and mayor of New York, that burger commercial, that fat piece of shit. Watching him be like, this is good. Like,
And he
it
looked like a piece of shit eating the
yes,
fries too. Not everyone looks like a
infuriates
piece
me.
of shit eating fries. I mean, he did, which is really, they did the hot dogs here. So it felt off. Outside of like,
Sure.
I've got doctor friends of mine that say, you know what, if you're over 40, they actually figured this might not be a bad thing for you. I've got other doctor friends of mine that say they're just not comfortable with it whatsoever for so many reasons. And I mean, up front, I'm in no way an expert on immunization. I don't pretend to be. I don't have the skills to discuss whether or not this had relevance. But I do feel that there was a discomfort that was felt by a lot of people, even a lot of people that aren't necessarily against any form of medication. There was a palpable discomfort on the many people about how this was done. And I guess for me, that's where most of the issue is. It's beyond the actual product. It's the way it was.
Right.
It's beyond promotion. It felt like propaganda.
Well, it was
Right.
the only time that they did something completely different than than what has happened in the past. Like when you look at things like whether it was, whatever, the Zika virus or Ebola or whatever, with every other pandemic that's ever happened, it's always been the elderly or sick need to shelter in place and let humanity go ahead and, live like they live their everyday life, because it's the healthy people's immune systems that are going to end up beating the virus anyways. But they completely reverse to that, right? Everybody's got to stay home. And I think that was probably one of the triggers that kind of set people off into going down this path of what the hell is going on? Something is not right here. But to circle back to the question, though, you talked about why is freedom so important when it comes to our healthcare and medicine. If we're not allowed to discuss things like this, then what happened yesterday, there were two announcements. One, we talked about the podcast thing, but also the creators of the mRNA vaccine won the Nobel Prize yesterday. That is correct, right?
That's
Matt?
news to me.
Yeah, yeah, that happened yesterday. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. And so they're literally rewriting the history books as we speak, not for right now. They're rewriting for 50, 60 years down the road. So that generation will have the perception, that these things occur. And so they're not going to know any different.
Yeah, and to be fair to mRNA technology, my understanding is that it goes far beyond the actual, dare we even call them vaccines that we were, presented for COVID. My understanding, based on, again, doctor friends of mine, some of which are all over the spectrum of what we could, think, is that there could be some really interesting applications with mRNA. Again, not at all my expertise. I don't even have an opinion. It is like, it's almost like you can't make that up, right? The fact that
Right.
the Nobel Prize would be awarded, considering the controversy. And I understand that the Nobel Prizes aren't necessarily, taking into account controversies, and that they. But then again, what's surprising to me is that Donald Trump, if you look at his record in terms of president and the fact that there were no wars, not a single war, and that I remember him being nominated for a Nobel Prize, and I remember people in my neck of the woods or people close to me thinking it was a joke, and obviously they figured it was a joke because it was Donald J. Trump, and I kept thinking, can you at least be objective enough to put your bias? Like, you're asking me to put my biases aside for so many of these issues, including COVID, the vaccines, which I honestly really try to do. As you can see from how I'm speaking to you guys, right? Like, I'm coming across as trying to balance things out. But then how come some of these same people can't balance out the fact that, outside of the fact that they might just absolutely hate his guts, truth is, there really was peace in the world.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
enough for the Nobel Prize people, to actually nominate him. So I have to give those guys credit, where it probably wasn't a popular choice even amongst a bunch of those guys, which I can just imagine are all liberals. But no, but you know what I mean? Like, but they probably are. So for them to say, okay, we're going to nominate this guy for a Nobel Prize for peace, yeah, it goes to show you.
No, and there was peace, and I understand. Believe me, I am kind of a Trump guy, yes, but I understand that people don't like the way he comes across with things. I totally get that, and I can't say if I were in that position and I was being constantly hammered by the World Economic Forum and everybody else attacking me, that I wouldn't have been a little bit more arrogant to try to protect yourself, because you do have to protect yourself. And so, but nobody can genuinely sit here and say that their life is better now than when it was when he was in office. Everything has changed. We are censored left and right now. He tried to talk about that. Our economy, at least here in America, is tanking, and it's putting small businesses and a lot of outside practitioners out of business as well, Chris. Like you and I have
Yep.
had this conversation that there's going to be a lot of practitioners and people in the strength and conditioning industries that aren't going to have a job anymore because
Right.
those industries are going to crumble, you know? And so it's one of those things where you may not like how the guy presented it, but his policies and what he did worked.
And that's starting to come out more and more. And I mean, even in Canada, funny enough, because I think things are getting bad enough that for people who didn't care much about politics or finances or the economy, funny enough, when you have a hard time feeding yourself and you wonder if you're going to be able to keep your house with interest rates going up, you start getting really interested. And so maybe in a way, the good thing about this is that people have a higher level of interest in politics, which I really think we have to. Like I think we need to. We all care about each other. We all want, our families to be happy and healthy. We all want really strong, safe communities. And I actually do think liberals want the same thing. Like I mean, I joke about
They do,
liberals
and that's
all
how
the
they
time, but
attack
they
them
do.
because they have a bleeding heart. They have a bleeding heart. And so, yes, you're right. They do want the same thing.
Right.
But then how we go about it, obviously, and this is the thing, right? So there's very few politicians that have been able to stand up to the World Economic Forum, which before COVID, not many people even knew what that was.
Correct.
And a lot of these, more conservative or right-wing politicians have been openly standing up against it. And quite frankly, now mainstream media, even in Canada, has no choice but to bring up the World Economic Forum. And most people knew what that was 2, 3 years ago, and they're starting to understand now that freedom is not so obvious when your prime minister or your president is just about being told what to do by someone who was never elected, who's the president of this World Economic Forum. That's not conspiracy. This is what's going on.
This is fact. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm going to change direction here a little bit. How old are you, Matt?
I'm 45.
Okay, so you're about 10 years older than me. I'm 36 here. Okay, one of the things that I have found to be very interesting in my short career, and I'm curious to hear your stance on it as well. For those of you who are still with us, if you're still listening, I think where the three of us are coming from is we're talking about this and bringing it up, and we're doing it because our avenue to improve the world that we live in is through health. It's through health care, quote unquote. Whether I'm not a doctor, you're a DO, Chris, you're a former PT, and just in helping people heal, right? Now, what's going to happen though is in my career, I haven't even had a chance to start my career essentially because I've already had to go through, and I'm not playing victim. I refuse to do that, but I think it's legitimate, and I do think there's an attack on us happening. I had to go through the '08 crash right when my career should start, right when it should start, couldn't get a job. Now I'm 10 years into business, and now this is happening, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there like that. And I think as information gets out there, we have more access to people like you and me, more access to natural healing, more access to things like the newbie than we did 15, 20 years ago or whatever. And when you see these political agendas that are occurring, it's crushing people like us, people that can actually help other people heal and get better. And that's got to be part of the system, is they don't want that to happen. They want you to be a patient of the system because it benefits the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I think the most powerful companies in the world are the ones that are trying to stay very lucrative, and they also have to compete between each other. I'll say this: at some point, I was hired by Pfizer to give a conference. This was like I had hair, man. I was even younger than you are right now. Like I was probably early 30s, and a good friend of mine was the type of dude that gets you into companies to give talks and so forth. And I remember going into Pfizer and obviously very interested in business already. I spoke to the people that were in charge of the plant in Montreal. So how's business? And they, what they said to me was, it's not the greatest because a lot of the blockbusters that we had where, we were exclusive, the patents are about to run out. And so we're looking at hard times coming forward. And I swear to God, I asked the following question. I said, "So what do you guys? What's in the pipeline? What's?" And they said, and I quote, "We're looking into making more vaccines." Um, and I mean, you know what? From a company standpoint, I get it. There's shareholders. It's competitive. You don't want to go out of business, and it is a business. And I say that with respect, but I also say that with the premise that you really have to wonder. Like the number one priority. I'll say this very comfortably. Cannot be health. Be-
Yep.
be- you cannot patent vitamin D, no matter how powerful it might be, and no matter how many studies are on it. And so this is the thing, right? So I think we just have to be fair on all accounts. And once you realize that these companies are in for profit, and just like any other company, they're in a sense they're no worse. And when you see how much they have to invest in research before any drug comes out on the market, now obviously sometimes they screw with the system, like in the cases of opioids, which governments are starting to now look at lawsuits, class action lawsuits in Canada against pharmaceutical companies for knowing that opioids were going to be problematic. So obviously, there's been a bunch of cases where they've purposefully misled people. So I think that also has to be said. I would think that the skepticism when a new drug comes on the market, when it's been developed relatively fast, which was the case for the COVID vaccines, the fact that there wouldn't be skepticism would be
Right.
scary. And what's scarier, and this goes back to freedom, is the fact that we're not able and allowed to bring it up. We would literally be censored on Facebook, for bringing up. And I mean, I'm not even talking about, let's say, people like myself who don't know what they're talking about. I'm talking about doctors, immunologists in France and different countries, whose accounts were completely shut down because
Yeah,
they
they're in jail.
they weren't even against it. Like if I think of Raoult in France, who's one of the top immunologists who was promoting hydrochloroquine, he wasn't even against the vaccine. Like you couldn't even put the tag on him that he was anti-vax. He wasn't. But his perspective was that there probably is more to it than just a vaccine, that we have to look into other avenues and we have to do more. And I think with looking back now, it'd be hard to think that the guy was saying stupid shit. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's almost like, well, I want to do whatever I can to help my patient or to help my patients, and do whatever it takes, whether it be a vaccine, or whether it be hydroxychloroquine, whether it be ivermectin, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, I'm willing to. If as a physician or whoever, I'm willing to do whatever it is to help my patients. I can understand that perspective. What I can't understand is, oh, let's cover this up. All right. Again, I'm not specifically talking about a vaccine, but any kind of medication that's out there to cover up a symptom from a disease. It, you know, I'm okay with that too, as long as that's the patient understands. Oh, this um, pain medicine is made to cover up my pain. It doesn't fix the underlying problem. Okay, I'm fine with that. You know what? I
Yeah.
don't want to hurt either. You know what? I'm okay with covering up a symptom, as long as I also have some sort of a pathway, if
To
it's
heal.
if it's to heal, right, if it's possible. And I think that's where, that's one of the things. Like I said, I'm going to go back to my partner here. Some of the things that John has learned how to do from Dr. J, and I think through posturology and what you do, Dr. Matt, and that is a lot of what you do actually can help that patient heal themselves. Okay, and it's like it's the same thing with the newbie. Okay, I'm gonna give Garrett a shout out there. You know, there's a lot of things that they can do to help that person heal, actually get better, and yet I think that's a lot of things that we're complaining about are products or things out there that don't allow the healing. They're just made to cover up and
Right.
only cover up.
But and you can't blame people for being brainwashed to think that. And yes, a lot of people are brainwashed because there should be a reasonable expectation that we can trust our government, that we can trust the doctors that are, running this whole thing. There should be a reasonable expectation we could trust Fauci, right? it should be a reasonable expectation, but it's clearly not. And I think I want to make sure we get the point here, because I wouldn't be shocked if this episode gets taken down pretty quickly. So if anybody actually gets what I'm about to say before it gets shut down, is I think all three of us are sitting here saying, like, yes, we are very much in the mindset of the body can heal. Doesn't mean that sometimes it can't use a little help. And I don't think that as a believer, as a believer in God, I don't believe that we would have medication if that wasn't, if he didn't intend for us to have it. There's a time and place for medication, but it's not the end all be all. There's a time and place for vaccines. Of course, to a degree, right? Like, yeah, we eradicated polio, but guess what? The polio vaccine was actually made with the virus, right? I believe. There's a time and place for it, right? But it's things got off the path big time, especially with this COVID stuff.
Yeah, it's like there's one solution as opposed to, well, wait a minute, maybe there is something to the hydroxychloroquine. Maybe there is something to it.
Because hey, when Mandy and I and my wife, when we both came down with COVID, like, hey, it put me down. Like, but it was odd. I've said it before. Is I could tell it wasn't just a regular virus. Like, I could feel it. Something it didn't feel right. And like, I don't really get sick. I maybe get a sinus infection, but I guess when you've had 5 sinus surgeries because you don't have any sinuses, that kind of happens periodically. It didn't feel right, and Mandy had it bad. And sure enough, when Mandy got it, you absolutely called one of my closest friends, who's one of our healthcare providers. I was like, I need help. I mean, of course.
Yep.
Give me something to get some of this inflammation down a little bit, right? There's a time and place for everything, is what I'm saying. But I should have asked you this question in the beginning, Matt, but I guess, that's why I shouldn't call these guest interviews, because I suck at interviews. This is just a chatting, But what got you going down this road? Like, when did your eyes become open to a lot of this?
My first patient ever was my dad, and my dad was suffering from knee pain from getting older, I guess, right? He had arthritis in one knee, arthrosis in the other. I was getting into physical training, conditioning. So when he had his appointment at the orthopedic surgeon, I went with him. And, the surgeon thought, okay, well, there's nothing to really operate here. We'll just give you injections of, Synvisc and whatever else. And then, I'm the physical trainer there with his dad. So my dad's asking him, so what should we do, in terms of exercise? And I'll always remember this. The surgeon just looked at us and he said, oh, just do some squats. And I swear to God, that was, and so we left the office that day. And I think up until that point in my life, I had 100% trust that whatever I would be told by a professional would be what is. And then I thought, okay, this actually makes no sense. I mean, he basically has a hard time walking. I understand that a surgeon is not a trainer. Like, I understand that. And I can appreciate that people wouldn't have the answer. Just tell me you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because
a lot of value in that, yeah.
Not that we were going to load him on a front squat or, but like body weight squat is what he was telling me. But I kind of thought, is there really research on this? Like now with, like I was probably in my early 20s now. So 25 years later, I'm thinking this was probably just out of his ass because he, just wanted to help, didn't know what to say. I don't think he wanted to do anything negative. But so from that point on, and then later on, my dad wanted to lose weight, so he went to see a dietitian, and I went with him. And then I was already into training and nutrition. So she had a Diet Coke can on the desk, and she was fat, which is okay. You're allowed to be fat, but then it just didn't. The vibe wasn't. And then whatever she was saying to my dad, and I kept thinking, my gosh, this has not. I knew my dad didn't want to be a bodybuilder, but I could appreciate how bodybuilders got lean, how they lost fat, and I figured maybe that would be good for other people too. And nothing of what she was saying resembled what these bodybuilder guys and gals were doing. So my lack of trust in people with a diploma just literally increased over the years, and quite frankly, mostly with just being with my dad. When it hits close and it's people you love, it creates a bit more of a, in me at least, an impression where I thought, okay, well, let me dig, let me see what could be done. Mm-hmm. And it just never stopped. And obviously, COVID made it all explode because we had more time.
Yeah.
And, when the CDC came out with the initial mortality rate and then those numbers dropped drastically a few weeks into it, and I kind of thought, okay, like, and this whole, like, it came out of China. Was it from the lab? Was it not from the lab? There were too many elements with this where it was touchy to talk about that I thought, listen, if you're comfortable with something, you bring it up. Too many things were hidden, not said, half said. So, I mean, for anyone who was remotely skeptical of a bunch of people with a bunch of diplomas, this did not help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Again, it all circles back. Like your experience is very similar to mine. It circles back to having the freedom to be able to discover and research. And we are on a very slippery slope right now where that freedom is about to dissolve and go away.
Right.
And because your story is close to mine, like, I was an athlete growing up and a reasonably decent athlete. I played, well, to say I played Division II basketball is a stretch, but I was on the team at least, so I at least could make it to college, but I had back pain my entire life and it was nobody ever figured it out. And, my parents were both very, very well-respected healthcare people in our area, very well-respected. And so I had access to the best in the area, but nobody ever figured it out until the tumor broke off my spine. And then that's when, everything kind of went downhill. But that scenario is what put me on the path to training, because I got to the point where I tried PT and chiro and everything else after surgery. After surgery, having the tumor gone helped, but still had some pain. Nobody could help me. Nobody could figure it out. Like, I was like, I still have pain here. And so I just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to figure it out myself. And that's how I started training. And then fast forward, all of a sudden I become the guy in this commercial gym where people come to because they're done with their rehab, yet they still have pain. And then that's how, the connections with Dr. J occur, and then the newbie and all that stuff. And it's like, without the freedom to be able to see that information, to reach out and explore, none of us would be here.
Yeah, I agree.
When I was 19 years old, I had a sacroiliac
So that was what,
joint
like
injury.
1880?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, it was a long
Did
time
y'all
ago.
have medicine then, or y'all were still using the leeches and stuff, right?
Well, I'm getting there, but
Okay.
it's funny. But go to my primary care doc, and they don't know what it is. You got pain? Okay, here's pain medicine. I went back. Yeah, I'm still hurting. Okay, I'll send you to an orthopedic surgeon or orthopedist. It tells me the same thing. Yeah, we don't see anything wrong. Here's a little pain medicine. Well, I've already got that. I don't need that. That's my first experience with a chiropractor. Oh, you got a sacroiliac joint injury. Two visits later, I'm 100% fine. And and so that was, again, John, like you said. So did medicine help? I have no idea. I never took it, but
Yeah.
but the manual medicine did in that particular case. That was my experience with it, and so. You can imagine going into the field of physical therapy, and you're politically supposed to be butting heads with chiropractic, and I would hear some of my colleagues, "Oh, chiropractors, this, that, the other, whatever," and of course my response would be, "What? You ever see one? You ever go to one?" And of course, and 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. That's a little bit more commonplace to see, for chiropractic now, but then. It was very, very unusual. You didn't see a chiropractor's office, as frequently as you do now. And, in the 1880s. So it was, it was interesting to see, trying to filter through, hey, what works, what doesn't. I knew what didn't. And that was, I'm not a surgical case. I knew that was it. That was not it. I knew I had pain, and what's the problem? Had to find the solution. And again, if we don't have this freedom that we've been kind of talking about, would I even had the ability to seek that person out? I have no idea.
Yeah. So with all these changes, Matt, like that have happened since the pandemic, and now we know there are vaccine injuries, things like, I know multiple people. I know people that have passed away. People in my gym have passed away from. How has all this impacted your practice?
So in Quebec, we're probably the most vaccinated province or state of all of America, right? People here bought into it. The commercials were really good. I have to say the commercials were great. Very emotional. Like, you want to see your grandmother, so do it for her. Like, honestly, they did
Yeah.
phenomenal in terms of the
A little better than eating a cheeseburger.
yeah, no, definitely, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was better than that. So the vaccination rate here was phenomenally high. Um, so it became this thing where just everyone typically got vaccinated. Um, so how could I say there was no controversy, right? People just did. Now, what's interesting now is to see that the more doses they ask, that the moral non-written contract for us in Quebec was 2 doses. We were told by our prime minister basically 2 doses and you have your freedom. And they've actually used the word freedom. So when the third dose came around,
Wow,
there
hold on.
started
Let
to
me
be
let me make sure I understood that. They literally said you need to take 2 doses and then you have your freedom.
yeah, 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 literally, yeah. Yeah. But
Jeez.
people here are willing to give it away pretty quickly. You don't have right-wing Quebec. It doesn't exist. And if it does, it's very small. You're starting to have a right-wing Canada now that is like, there would be elections today. Two things would happen. Trump would win, and Pierre Poilievre would win in Canada majority government. So obviously, at the national level, people are fed up of, I would say, policies where they have less control, if you want to put it that way. But Quebec is its own thing where people are very comfortable. People are very comfortable essentially being told what to do and not wanting to question much. So obviously I attract people that are a bit like myself. So maybe I have a few more entrepreneurs. Maybe I have a few more people that are into, looking at what's happening with the economy and finances. So obviously those people are more free thinking, more pro freedom. But I have a bunch of people that are probably just, they just don't understand why we would even have this discussion. They wouldn't be against it, but they wouldn't get it.
Has it changed how you do anything? Are you more hyper aware of different health history related matters? If somebody says, "Yeah, I took 4 jabs," has
Yeah,
that type of
no,
thing changed for you a little bit?
everyone has here. So everyone
Okay.
has
Okay.
their,
Yeah, I guess
yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
it's about 85. I think we were above 85% of the people that had 2 doses or more. So it's nothing like the numbers you guys have in the States on a national level, and it's especially nothing like the numbers in certain states where the, rates were quite low. 85%, 2 doses. It's like that's the new normal if you want to use that expression, right? Everyone has. Um, I don't personally know anyone that has been injured. That being said, they did get rid of a few vaccines here that you guys had access to for a longer period of time. We never got the Johnson and Johnson, which was the 1 dose Miracle Wonder. We never got access to that one. And then AstraZeneca was removed from the choices here early on, which was associated with more injuries. So for better or worse, we pretty much pulled it off with Moderna and Pfizer. And people that I had spoken to that were in the pharma industry that were very, very much aware of what we're talking about, their comfort level with any of them was higher with Pfizer. Not trying to promote Pfizer, but their comfort level based on the relative safety of them all, it was Pfizer. So when my turn came around, I got 3 doses because I wanted to work and I wanted to travel as quickly as possible. So at some point to get into France, I had to have a more recent dose than the first 2 I had taken. So funny enough, I've been more vaccinated than so many people around me that were pro, and I was fully against. I ended up getting a few more, but 3, and that's rare. Most people have had 2, but did it change how I work? Not so much because it's kind of a common denominator here.
Mm.
All right. So as we're getting close to having to wrap this up, because I know all 3 of us have some hard stops here. We're talking about something that is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. A lot of practitioners, a lot of strength coaches, a lot of parents, quite frankly. It's going to make them uncomfortable, but it needs to be talked about because regardless of your stance on vaccinated, non-vaccinated, whatever, the bottom line is there's information that is out there now that shows myocarditis is a thing, right? Kids are dropping dead. It's happening, okay? There is proof of this. And so if a young strength coach isn't aware of this, then I think they're putting their clientele at risk. So I bring this up because I believe that a lot of what occurring, and this is my belief, is that this is the intentional destruction of America. America is the last standing voice. We are the last barrier to a one world government. And when America declines, because it is, and if it collapses, which it's on track to, and if you guys don't believe me, if you still think we're the strongest country in the world, you need to really do your research, people. Go look at China's naval fleet. That's really all you got to do. And look at how many shipyards we have here in America. Side note, we have 4 shipyards here in America. 4 for our naval fleet, if my numbers are correct. I believe China has 12, and I believe one of their shipyards is capable of producing more naval cruisers than all of ours combined. So, anyways, the point in bringing all that up is this is the intentional destruction of our country, the country that can protect the world because we do have firearms. We do have a voice, even though it's being censored. As a healthcare provider and somebody who's very close to the states, what's your opinion on this? As America loses this fight, we have to step up and speak up against it.
Yeah, no, I think you put it really well. All democracies look towards America in terms of making sure democracies remain alive. The threat of China is real. I don't think anyone, no matter their political stance, is disputing that. I think mainstream media doesn't want to bring it up because they don't want to freak people out. But I do think real things need to be said, and that's what the deal is. I actually also believe it's the reason why world authorities did not want to accuse China of too much wrongdoing in the COVID issue because some people say to protect them. I'm not against that theory, but I also do believe it was to not piss them off too much. I think maybe it's a bit of both. When you look at how the Olympic Committee manages or deals with China, that's very peculiar as well. It's almost as if, we're scared, yet at the same time, we don't want people to know. Is there favoritism there? Trump has brought that up. He's made some good points, numbers to show that that was the case. So you're right. It's definitely of concern, and it's of concern to everyone. And this notion of a one world government, for some people, is conspiracy. But when you look at how things are organizing around the World Economic Forum, when you look at firms like McKinsey, and the fact that they work for all these governments, that they also work for pharmaceutical companies. I mean, when you look at what Hunter Biden's involved with, the proof that's been made that he's been receiving amounts of money that no one seems to be able to understand, and that's outside of partisanry. I'm saying this is I'll
Yes.
take off the hat for that segment. This is fact.
Yeah, it's fact, exactly.
Left-wing mainstream liberal media in Quebec is pointing this out as fact. This is no controversy. So there's a case to I think we at least have to be curious, and we need to be asking for answers, and if we're not getting them, maybe we need to change who's at the top.
No,
Yep.
I agree. What are your thoughts on Vivek?
On who? Oh,
Vivek
Vivek.
Ramaswamy.
Yeah, I mean, he says all the right things. He's young, he's dynamic, which I really can appreciate. He's also not white, which I like to see in a sense where
Sure, yeah.
conservatives are going to be conservatives are often going to be accused of being racist. So it's kind of cool to see that
Come
they
move
would
down
support-
south and you can experience that.
it's kind of cool to see that they would support someone who's not white, which I think is a strength on any side of the fence, to have people that look different and that come from different places or different countries even. I think what's interesting about this race for the Republican nomination is that Trump is essentially unbeatable, no matter how much people love or hate him.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something to be learned. And it's a lot of the admiration I have for him is in that regard. It's not so much that I would be always for or against anything he says. It's just that, to quote it nicely, the son of a bitch, you just can't beat him.
Yeah.
And there's something to be learned about that. So I do like Vivek, but at the same time, I'm also a fan of JFK Jr., you know, and although he's a Democrat, I really
Yeah.
do like a lot of what he says. Um, you know, so, but yeah, no, but Trump is Trump, and it's fascinating for me to see that he's able to survive absolutely anything and everything. It's just, to me, it's just mind blowing, honestly.
Yeah. Well, he's able to survive it because none of it was true. It was all fake and made up, which has been proven in a court of law. But
the
I
public opinion part of it, you know what I mean, John?
Okay,
Like,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
outside of, yeah, the fact that he can still at some point gather the public opinion. Now, more than once with the Republicans. Remember when he first went into politics, people didn't even think he had a shot at the Republican nomination. You know, I mean, this is crazy when you think about what's gone on after all these years. People laughed at the fact that he was presenting himself. So he wins, and then he beats Clinton, which wasn't, even with the email scandal, wasn't the easiest thing to beat Clinton. This was the establishment in one person. This was all of it. And I remember waking up that morning, and I wasn't enough into it to understand what the hell had just happened. And I wasn't pro or anti-Trump. I woke up thinking, he won? And my faith in media, and I had no reason to think media was so wrong, but that morning I thought, oh, we were screwed. I mean, because obviously the predictions were so far from the result that from that point on, in my personal opinion, I have been questioning anything and everything media. They had one shot at the can to annihilate him and to keep the narrative going. And they might have won in 2020, but them losing in 2016 was
Those
the
of you that
real.
are listening to this, there were some air quotes around
Yeah.
that.
I mean, those people are off. You know what? Let's say they won. Let's say
Sure.
81 million people voted for him. One thing everyone can agree on right now is that those 81 million people have never been more quiet. That's as well.
Yeah,
Right.
81 million people. Yeah, that's more than who voted for Obama. And I
Yeah.
remember when Obama ran. I remember how charismatic he was and all the things he promised. He said he was going to do. And man, it sounded good, you know. But yeah, you telling me
he was a great
this
speaker.
guy got 81 million votes? But anyways, yeah, I digress.
Out of his basement in Delaware, which
Yeah.
Right.
just adds
Yeah.
to it, right? Because again, I'm always like, okay, I want to believe it. I want to believe it. How do I do it to believe it? And I add the elements, and I'm like, no wonder there's skepticism and conspiracy. He ran out of his basement. Obviously, he had COVID to blame for it, which worked out great for him. Won't be as hot probably in a few years if let's say there's no more like COVID-20 or whatever they could come up with. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I like Vivek a lot. He came on Real AF, Andy Frisella's show, who's obviously a big influence. We're pretty involved, First Forum, things like that. Big influence of mine, and that's what sold me on Vivek. I really liked listening to him. I don't know if you've listened to that, but it's a great episode. I'd encourage you to listen to it if you haven't. But yeah. But anyways, man, this has been great. We'll see how long this lasts. Guys, I imagine this probably won't be up on YouTube very long, but we'll we'll try.
It'll be
I
up
think
there as long as it will be. Yeah.
The moral of this is like, again, we're not left or right. We are all pro freedom here. And if we don't speak up, then our job is to help people in this field. And if we don't speak up, we're not helping people because they're not going to have an option down the road. So, but
Amen.
This is good stuff. All right, Matt, where can people follow you if they don't follow you already?
So on Instagram, if you want a healthy mix of the political posts and the more work-related, it's Matt Boule, MATBOULE. That's on Instagram. That's where I put all my funky stuff.
Awesome, man.
Nice.
This is you're the GOAT, bro. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Matt.
Anyway,
All right, see you, man.
take care, guys.